Good evening. My name is Lorenzo Witherspoon. I'm of late I've been saying I'm a Barbadian Liberian. I live in Switzerland. I've just retired from the United Nations and I'm on my way to where I call home, which is South Africa, in 2 weeks. I'm from the Porte clan. My mother was Beryl Best Brewer. Her father was George Stanfield Best, who came to Liberia from Trinidad after World War II, after having served in the British Army. And that's a long story. I will come back to that later because the Prime Minister in Barbados told me I did another story. And my grandmother's father was Conrad Cuslet Porte, the son of John Prince Porte, who was on the 1865 expedition from Barbados to Liberia. About 5 years ago, maybe a little longer, while my daughter was in school at McGill University in Canada, one of her classmates, and she was just her first year really, one of her classmates asked her, with whom she had made a bond of friendship, invited her to a meeting of the Caribbean Club. Said, Lois, let's go to the Caribbean Club meeting. And she says, well, I'm not Caribbean. And she says, Lois, don't be silly. Listen to yourself. Look at you. You are Caribbean. And she said, well, yes, you know, my dad told me that his great-great-grandfather came from Barbados. And the girl says, shut up. There you have it. Let's go. And that turned everything around for her. Then she started calling me, Dad, we talked about this thing. We need to dig into it. I want us to do this research, this ancestry tracing to find out more about your great-great-grandfather. And so began the work while she was doing her undergrad work. And until she came to London, to LSE, to do her graduate studies, we had been working on it together. I enlisted the support of my cousin, Rodney C.A., the journalist, and he put his hand in too. And later on, as time went by, I met the Barbadian ambassador who had just been posted to Geneva. And we met at a official event and just hit it off just like that. You know, he says, I told him about my Bayesian heritage, origin. And he says, look, listen, you are Bayesian. I can tell you that just from listening to you and just from talking to you, just from looking at you. And I'm going to make sure that you find your people. And so that began the actual, the post-research part of it. And then so we started communicating with people there, with the head of the archives and stuff. And then he says, look, why don't you go to Barbados? Because his father then came later and said to me, Lorenzo, you know what? I'm sorry, I have horrible news for you, but there's nothing Liberian about you, my friend. You are a pure Bayesian. I know so many people back home that look just like you. And so suddenly all this help just came up, and the ambassador arranged not only for me to go there, and Professor Matt Riley was very instrumental because he tied it in. He had done a lot of work, you know him, in Liberia. He's an archaeologist, a professor at New York University. And we planned to be there at the same time. And while we were there, the ambassador made an appointment for me to be received by the Prime Minister. And we went there, and she was very busy. Of course, it was COVID time. She gave me 15 minutes. But things were going so well. An hour later, that tells the Prime Minister, you have 2 appointments that you've already missed. She was enjoying it. We were all enjoying it so much. She assembled half of her cabinet. They were there, you know, and I mean, we had a fantastic time. She actually says, Lorenzo, you know, I like what you're doing. You know, I want you to help me. I want us to not only bring Bajans from Africa back here, but our people need to know their origins. They don't know their roots. In fact, a lot of them are probably in denial, you know, because they say they are Bajans, you know, they don't know that in fact they are Africans, you know. They figure, well, if you're Black, you must be African, you know, but they don't know that side of the story, and they haven't really tried to connect with it. Even while I was there, I met some people. I had met someone before going, that someone else that the head archivist that told me about, and we're communicating, and she was a little cautious and standoffish and stuff. And we got on the island, I met her, and she came to meet me at a restaurant, and she apologized. And she says, Lorenzo, I'm so sorry, because my brother wanted to come, but I had asked my brother to come rather. And at the ninth hour, he said, no, he couldn't come. He told me why, because he had met some Nigerian guy and in some business deal, the guy duped him, you know. I said, come on, man, you know. So they're afraid of Africans, you know. So I said, well, okay, so it's his business, you know. I will come back to that story later on, because now he's chasing me to get to meet me. After I had been there and we did the whole thing with the prime minister, we got full coverage, TV, radio, interviews everywhere. And now he wants to meet his cousin, you know, that he was afraid to meet the last time because, the first time rather, because of the incident that he reportedly had with a Nigerian. I was reared by my grandmother. And growing up on Snapper Hill, on Broad Street, Snapper Hill, right next to Salvatore's restaurant. I'm sure you know exactly where that is. You know, that's where our home was. And it's interesting because I found out just recently doing this research that in fact, the house in Crozierville, where Uncle Albert stayed, which is where John Prince Porte built, you know, one of the first things they did when they got there was first build Christ Church, which is the church we go to there. And just you go down that road past Ensu House, and that's the house up there on the hill, Uncle Albert House, which has now since fallen because during the wars it was subject to neglect. But so yes, my grandmother, Lillian Best, she raised me together with my other aunts. And while I never really lived on an ongoing basis in Crozierville, we went there for two key reasons. One, if you had done something bad, they sent you to Uncle Albert. You know, Uncle Albert was a disciplinarian, Albert Porte, you know, and you cried, oh, please, I don't want to go, I wouldn't do it again, you know. But so you either went up there because you had been bad, and Ma, we call her Ma, so would say, I will send you to brother. She called him brother, he called her sister. You know, typical Barbadian. I found the same thing, they do the same thing over there when I was there, you know, they say, refer to each other the same way. Or during the school breaks for holidays, we'll go up there and help to do some work on the farm. You know, all of our people were farmers. You know, we grew, in addition to raising pigs and everything else, we grew, Uncle Albert had a gin distillery, a sugar cane. We grew sugar cane, you know, so well, they're working in the farm, you know. So, so Uncle Albert really became like a surrogate father of mine, you know, because Mr. Best, my grandmother's husband, had just died. Well, not just a few years before I was born. And so she was alone with 8 children that she had in Monrovia. So what happened was I found out that their mother was a king. Okay, so she had was it a brother? She had a brother or her father, some relationship, that owned this house on Broad Street, Snapper Hill. And so when she died, she didn't have children, and she gave it to my grandmother. And the deal they had between my grandmother and her brother Albert Porte, I think they were about 5 or 6, was that you stay in Monrovia, you take the house there, we would take the house in Crozierville. But of course, those houses, I mean, Uncle Albert's 12 children, they all lived in that house, and the same way all of us lived in the house in Crozierville. So it was, you know how it is back home, you know, it was like one big house and everybody's in there at every time, you know. I'm sure there were times where 4 or 5 of us were sleeping in the same bed and all of that, you know, in addition to the kids that they were rearing, you know, you know, but thankfully we're blessed. We both had big house in Crozierville and big house in Monrovia. So we all lived together, you know, and so that's why we don't even refer to ourselves as cousins. We are siblings, we are brothers and sisters. you know, because that's how close we were. You know, I was introducing Rodney Sear, who was actually my cousin. When I went to meet the prime minister, I said, "This is my brother, Rodney Sear." He said, "But wait a minute, his name is Sear. Your name is Witherspoon." You know, I said, "Yes, it's a long story, but I will just give you the abbreviated version." You know, his mother and my mother, his mother was my mother's elder sister. That makes him my brother. You know, where we come from. You know, and okay, everybody agreed on that. You know, so it was fine. But so in that upbringing, I can't remember the point in time, but there was a particular man, and his name was Mr. Best. He was a seaman, and he would come to Liberia at least twice a year when his ship came to dock, and he would come to the house on Snapper Hill. I guess he must have asked around, where are the best people? And, you know, like us, like the Goodriches, there's only one set of Goodrich, there's only one set of best in Liberia, you know? So somebody took him to Snapper Hill. And he and my mother and my grandmother forged, I mean, it's like they were born siblings. You know, they became so close, we used to call him uncle. His name was Keith Best. And that's where my young uncle, Keith Best, that's how he got the name from. Keith Neville Best, that was his name. Keith Neville Best. She named him Keith, and he took Neville himself. That was his name, Keith Neville Best. You know, but Mr. Best came at least twice a year. You know, and he would bring chocolates for us and all this stuff from the Caribbean, and they would sit down and talk about it. So my grandmother, through him, kept in touch or tried to find out about the family on that side. But he was the only one that ever came from there to our side. And it was in the line of duty because he was a seaman and the ships were coming regularly. I don't remember exactly when it was that he stopped coming, which means it told us that he must have died. But he must have stopped coming, I don't know, about 1970, 71, something like that. Because, yeah, and my grandmother stopped talking about him. But because of the stories that he had told her about whom, and because of what the stories she remembered from her grandfather telling her about whom, she made us understand that, you know, we were born in Liberia, but we are actually from Barbados. And that's where the story gets tricky. And I had to park that part of my research because when I started researching through doing the DNA research, these people kept pulling me and pushing me in a direction that I wasn't prepared to go. And I'll tell you what I mean. They told me that, okay, yes, John Prince Porte did come from Barbados to Liberia. But his forebears came from Nigeria. And I said, wait a minute. That's for another day. You know, right now my focus is on finding out about this Bayesian thing. Oh gosh, man, she was just a darling. You know, she was a disciplinarian to the core, but she instilled in us, all of us, and I was the first grandchild, so I was like her last child. She instilled in all of us a profound sense of respect, a profound sense of honesty. You know, these were the things that mattered to her. We were poor, you know, but you would never hear that any of us, or you know, would phone stealing something or no. Those were sacrosanct things. These are things for Uncle Albert. These are the things he not taught you, he beat them into you. And Uncle Albert, oh, he was a brilliant man, huh? When he was beating you with the cane, he was reciting poetry. Beat a child until he knows. If he grumbles at the door, call him back and give him more. And you start crying. He says, dry up, dry up, dry up. Everybody was afraid of Uncle Albert. He was just a different kind of man, you know, and a man who, you know, I wouldn't say wouldn't take no for an answer, but he was just so dutiful in his appreciation for doing the right thing, doing it the right way, bringing up a child in the way he should grow, you know, so when he's old, he would never depart from it, you know. These were the values, you know. And Mom, when we went to our farm, we had a farm in Banjo, where we raise pigs and do some vegetables and stuff. So she was also a farmer. We had a farm in Banjo in Brewerville, and we went there on Saturdays, you know, to tend the farm, you know, do some harvesting and stuff, maybe slaughter a pig or two. We raised pigs. And when we came back, before we sat down to eat, she packed something small and sent to all the neighbors. Take this to Miss Johnson. Take this to Miss Van E. Take this to Miss Buckle. Take this. And these are the things we learned from her, you know. And so when people say, well, Lorenzo, why are you this way? You like people, you're friendly, you kind. I say, you know what? That's how I grew up, you know. So these are things, being mean or being, you know, unkind or being a hoarder or something. It's just not, even if I wanted to, I couldn't do that just because of that upbringing that she instilled in us from way back then. And I saw the same thing when I went to Barbados, you know, the people, how respectful they are, how dutiful, how diligent they are, you know, how close they are, you know. And I say, yes, we are special. My mother, she was one of the smartest in the family, even though because of that, she didn't have the opportunity to complete college or get a college degree. But she was a prolific writer. She wrote music. She was one of the founding members of the Observer with my Uncle Kenneth back in the day. And she went with them to Banjul when they got kicked out of Liberia, and then they got kicked out of there, and she came to us in Djibouti at the time, and then later on came to South Africa, and she died in South Africa with us. She had gone back home to Liberia. Her husband died. He wouldn't leave Liberia. You know, these Liberian men, they're having a war. Say, let's go. Say, oh, you go out, stay here. You know them. And so he got very sick. And when she called me and said, listen, I want to go to Liberia, you know, Charlie died. I said, sure. But because she had left us in Djibouti, running back to Banjul, because they had been kicked out of Banjul now, Mr. Jawara, President Jawara, had been overthrown. And so she went back there, and the Americans gave the entire family, Uncle Kenneth, my Aunt Muriel, all of them visas to go to the States. And so she went there. She said, you guys get settled in South Africa, because we're on our way from Djibouti to South Africa on reassignment with the UN. And she says, when you get settled, I'll come. Well, she never came. So when Charlie died, she says, I said, I'll send you a ticket on the condition that I will route you through South Africa on your way back to the States, so you can come and spend some time with the children, because the children had now grown. She had seen my son when he was just born, my daughter when she was just born. And I said, come and spend some time with us, do a full medical checkup, and, you know, get some rest. Well, as fate would have it, when she arrived in Liberia, the shock, if not the trauma, of that heavy rainy season, you know, September, you know, that's September rain, you know, yeah. Between that and I guess the agony and the pain of the loss of a darling husband, something went amiss, and she had a stroke. She went straight into the hospital. And she insisted on coming out to go to her husband's funeral, which was in Crozierville, in our family cemetery there. You know the cemetery. Mm-hmm. And she was saying, yes, I want to be buried right here next to him. Well, 2 years later, she died while she was in South. So she came from South Africa, not 2 years later. What am I talking about? 6 months later. Because she came from Liberia to South Africa to us, as we had agreed. And we had to have an ambulance meet her at the plane, because they didn't know what was wrong with her in Liberia. You know, Liberia, there was no medical facilities, you know, and she went from the plane straight into the hospital. And she was there for about a month before she was released home to us. And she was doing well, you know, coming up. It was good. It's amazing how God works, because he must have been the one who arranged it that way, that she will come and bind and reconnect, especially with the grandkids, and spend some quality time with us, you know. And she was looking forward to going back to the States, but at the same time, wanting to spend more time with us. But she had 2 other children that she wasn't worried about us. She was worried about the 2 other children in the States who needed her to provide that foundational support, that strength, you know, and she wanted to go back. Well, we had a big 67th birthday party for her on the 15th of December. And about the day after, 2 days after Christmas, she started feeling not so well, and we had to rush her back to the hospital. And she stayed there until early February when she died. But because I never really lived with her, like I said, my grandmother raised me, you know, the time she came to see us in Djibouti when we lived and worked there, the time she spent with us in South Africa, where perhaps the moments that we were, the time we spent the most time together, and we became very, 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 very close. But she was a very humble person. In fact, she was amazed. She was amazed. She says, you know, it was Christmas time, and some friends came over, and we opened some champagne. And she says, Lorenzo, let's go. I want to talk to you. Took me into my study. Where you get this thing from? We are poor people. Where you get champagne taste in your mouth? This big house. It's only you 2 of you and the kids. Why you need this big house? Well, it's the epitome of humility, you know, and that's how Mom was, you know, humble, you know, and it transcended into a conversation I had about 6 years ago when I applied for a different position here in Geneva with my organization, the World Health Organization. And the guy looked at my CV and he says, but wait a minute. Now, he didn't focus on the fact that on the role I was currently serving in. The only thing he picked up from my CV, it was that, but wait a minute, Lorenzo, I see here you are an ambassador. Why does an ambassador want to do a job like this? You know, and I say, you know what? Thank you for asking that question. Because your mindset and my mindset, there's no space for them to coagulate. Because your thinking is that you are the ones that put people on pedestals that they don't belong on, you know? And while I would think, you would say, well, wait a minute, it's something, this guy, he must be a down-to-earth guy, you know, because if he feels this job is good enough for him, and I assure you, it wasn't to be the janitor in the office, huh? You know, but it just, you know, he couldn't believe that one could bring himself, you know, to operate within the realism of the situation, you know, because I told him, I said, listen, these things are things that I ascribe to you. And as I saw a good story recently where they were saying what this guy, when he was in the States, American guy, I think he was a Secretary of Defense or something, you know, while when a meeting was planned, they sent the car to pick him up with the chauffeur. By the time he got there, they had a nice porcelain cup with his coffee and stuff, you know, and then he got fired. And then the next time he went to another meeting, you know, he had to take the bus. And then he got there, he had to go and buy his own coffee cup with a paper cup, you know, and all of that. He says, oh my God. You know, he was occupying a position, you know, it wasn't his, he was just the occupant at the moment. And if we understand life, you know, to understand that, but life itself, we are just passing, you know. And so this is the kind of stuff between my Uncle Albert and all the people in our family and all the extended family, including Cousin Jonathan, the Goodriches, the Eastmans, the Throbs, you know, all of them. These are the things we all learn from them. And this is why you would know that if one of your mother or grandfather or relatives saw you out in the street somewhere misbehaving, where they were justified in whipping you, and when you go home, your mother will whip you on top of that. How much time do we need to get the message? The little time, if I could, I don't think it would amount to 5 years of my entire life that I spent time with my mother. And in just that little time, it helped to mold me into the person that I am. Now, those of us that are fortunate to spend their entire lives with their parents, I don't think they even realize what it means. But how much time do you need? If those 5 years with her and maybe with my grandmother did maybe 12 or 13 years before my grandmother, because I left and went to the States as an exchange student. You know, if those have done for me what they've done for me, then I mean, you know, we need to look back at, you know, the things that are important to us, the things that make a difference to us, you know, that mold us, you know. And I have a brother and a sister, my mother's through her marriage to her late husband. And although they lived together, my thing is that they didn't get from her what I got from her in the short time that I spent with her, you know. But maybe that's the way it happens. But I think also, you just don't focus on what's being given, because you must reach out and take it too and accept it, you know? So the same way you can force a horse to the well, but you can't force it to drink, I think it's the same, no? Mm-hmm. You know? So maybe respectively, they, for whatever reason, did not drink, you know? But I remember when my mother, they first started the exchange program in Liberia, the first year, and I went to my mother and said, Mommy, please, I want to go. I want to go, you know. Okay, she had a good job. She was a secretary at one of the big oil companies and stuff. But her salary wasn't nothing. And $750 was all I was needed, man, to pay for that thing to go. My mother made sure she got that money against the advice of her husband at the time. Peace be to his ashes. She wanted to do this for her son because she believed that this will do something for him. This will take him, you know, over the Rubicon, you know. And I always valued that huge sacrifice she made for me. I'm sure she paid those debts or wherever she borrowed the money from, you know. But for her to go out and do that, you know, again, it's just very, very special for me. I was in the first group of students that came on the exchange program. It was interesting. I moved to between four families until the found the right one which was a good one, a black family with 3 children, a son my age who were in the same class. He was a football player. But all my friends, in fact, is amazing. They call me Senor because their knowledge of Africa was from the Portuguese and the Spanish, you know, who went there and brought all these slaves. So for me, I'm African, I'm Senor, you know. And just to satisfy them, I had to give myself a native name, Flomo Yakbawoloa, because they say, how can you be from Africa and you have a name like Lorenzo? I said, no, I have my African name. I made that up quickly, you know. You know, so, but they still call me Senor. But it was a year, the program was for a year. And it went very, very well. I mean, it was a real eye-opening experience for me, as it was, I'm sure, for every one of us that went, even the groups that went later. And of course, once I got back, I was trying my best to get back over, and again for the same financial constraints, it didn't happen until much later when I managed to get myself over and went back to Michigan, where I was, and started college there, and ended up later moving to California, where I finished. But it was very good. It was a very good experience, very good time. But in the back of my mind, I knew for me this couldn't be, it couldn't be the end. I couldn't see myself just living in America, all my life. I liked it, but I believe there was more to life than news, weather, and sports, and I wanted to come back home. So I came back home. When was that? I think about 87, 86, 87. And came back home, meaning I left the States. And then I went to Liberia and I joined the Foreign Service. And then I was appointed to Zaire. I think I went to the first posting. And that was the era of Mobutu. And we had very, very good relations with him. And then they had the coup in Zaire. And but before then, they had the coup in Liberia. And Mobutu, every year he met the diplomatic corps. And this year when he met the corps, he said that he recalled for the ambassador, I was the deputy ambassador, how when Zaire was started off in the early 60s, how President Talbot called him to Liberia and gave him $250,000, which was in today's money at that time was equivalent to about $10 million, he told us, and sent the university choir to sing at his inauguration. And he says, look, because the salaries were not coming by that time, the war was on, the money was going into buying arms. So he moved us out, he gave us some money. He says he moved us into villas at the place where they had the presidential, where the OAU was hosted that year. And we stayed there. In fact, my son was born in Zaire. He named my son after his son, Niwa, his oldest son, yeah. And so where we're living is on the cité Owa, the OAU village. He gave us, we had a villa here. And then his sister was staying here and his son was staying here. So we're three in a row. And the whole while my wife was pregnant, he would come, oh, how's the baby? How's Niwa doing? He's a boy. Okay, great, And it was nice. The day he was born, he came. My wife came home, he gave us a big fat envelope. And it was nice. But then they had the coup there and then we had to leave. So we left, and that's when I came, we went to the States and I came to Geneva. I said, look, I can't live in the States, let's see what I can do here. And then I got in with the UN. And so since then, I stayed with the UN until the war ended in Liberia. And I was asked to open the embassy in South Africa, where I already was working with the UN. And so I left the embassy and established the UN established the Liberian embassy there with concurrent accreditation to all the countries of SADC. So it was 9 countries that I was accredited to until about 4.5 years later when some journalists went to Liberia from BBC, among them was a Sierra Leonean and a South African journalist, and they were arrested there and said that they came to make the president look bad, President Taylor. And I called the president. I said, Mr. President, listen, 3 weeks ago, the Swazi king, who is your junior in many ways, there were some journalists that went across the border from Swaziland into Baban. And they sent messages. He said, you know what, just round those guys up and take them back to the border and let them go back. But it wasn't that way with them. Our people ran to Taylor and told him, say, oh, these guys here, they want to make you look bad. We'll teach them a lesson. Rounded them up, say, I don't know, it took them to Bella Yala, or they were on their way taking something. And I said, Chief, you gotta stop this, because it's not good, And short story shorter, that's when I decided, I can't I always felt I was working for the Liberian people, even though I was appointed by the president of Liberia. But I couldn't be associated with this anymore. So once I made that determination, it was easy for God to do his work to get the president to recall me. Sometimes people think they're doing something to you, you know. They don't know that they're under instruction from a higher power. You know. And of course, when I went to take leave of the foreign minister, I got a message that, oh, Chief Buthelezi, the Minister of Home Affairs, wants to see me. And he says, where are you going? We are claiming you. Bring your wife, bring your children. We're giving you permanent residency on the spot. You can stay as long as you want to stay here. And if you want to be a citizen in 5 years, you can come and apply for citizenship. And that's how we ended up staying in South Africa. You know, but again, it's all part of that journey. Because Buthelezi had spent a lot of time in Liberia too. He was also very fond of Liberia, the role Liberia played in the liberation struggle for South and Southern Africa. You know, so they all felt a debt of gratitude. And so it wasn't altogether surprising that they would respond the way they responded. My work with UNHCR was in the field, where people were running across the border with only their shirts on their backs because people were chasing them with cutlasses and machetes and stuff. I saw children came to me when I was running refugee camps, breathless, malnourished. Literally, their parents wrapped them down for dead on the ground at my office. And I put those children on a feeding program and on a nourishment program. And in 2 weeks, see these kids playing football in front of me. You know what? I felt bad, honestly, when I got my salary at the end of the month. This is not the kind of stuff you get paid to do. I'm already paid by being given the opportunity to serve in a role like this. And so having been here in Geneva for the last 13, 14 years, you know, with all this, you know, beautiful ambiance and everything, you know, infrastructure and all of that, I feel almost unnecessary, you know, because the work is out there in the field. That's where the needs are. That's where the needs are. That's where the people are suffering the most. And so the best part of my entire international civil service career was the years, 7.5 years, I spent with UNHCR, working in the most remote parts of countries, you know, borders. I mean, places where I can't even begin to describe it. So horrible, horrible. No lights, no nothing. One time I was crossing a river, the boat capsized. There was all mud, alligator-infested river in Djibouti, near the Ethiopian border, near Jijiga. Yeah, same thing in Tanzania, you know. So, but when you're doing these kinds of things, this kind of work, and you see the results, you know, it's just like, God, thank you for choosing me, for giving me this opportunity to do this work. You know, so I feel it's the same way I feel sorry for our kids today, you know, who are born in the diaspora, who didn't go to YMCA like we did, who didn't do all, you know, that you know, upbringing we had. These kids are lost. All they're doing now is this tech stuff and on the computer and all of that. I really feel sorry for them. Barbados is a work in progress, and with a dynamic, magnanimous leader that they have in the prime minister, and now the president, and the deputy prime minister, 3 women, and the head of CARICOM, which is based in Barbados. I think it's virgin territory for our young people to go back and identify with and try to take it to the next level. The world has changed. A lot of people don't realize it. The world is not going to be the way we knew it before COVID came here. It's totally revolutionized. And those that realize it, the quicker, the sooner, the better off they will be. This is an opportunity, especially in renewable energies, in tech, in IT. You know, this is the time for these young people, and that's what most of the young people are. The sphere they're in now, the roles they're playing now. It's a virgin territory, Barbados. And I say Barbados because, you know, people say, but what about Liberia? I say, you know what? If Barbados is work in progress, Liberia has an appointment with, you know, a destiny. But, you know, I don't know what that means when I say that, because if you look at the way things are going in Liberia, it looks like God himself will have to come down, you know, in Monrovia, start directing traffic, you know, to get us back on. It's so sad. But thankfully for us, because we have our home. We've been out for 153 years. 153 years. I was talking to one of our cousins, another cousin, he's a Porte too, Rufus Porte's son. And he was joking. He says, but you know, Lorenzo, yes, we'll go. But we don't just want the passport, we want land too, because we give them land too. You know, and I say, well, you know, it's not about tit for tat, okay? It's about, first of all, being fortunate to realize that this is where your forebears sweat and tears, and in some cases, corpses are buried. And this is where you belong, you know? And thankfully, especially for those that are in the greater diaspora, meaning in the North or in the West, you know, it's easier for them to get there, you know? For those in Liberia, the challenges are so monumental, financial being the first one, is that well, I think most of our young people, our young cousins are in the States anyhow. I think there are very few. There are a few there, but, you know, but the point I'm trying to make is that I think they each have a role to play. And that's what the Prime Minister asked me. He said, Lorenzo, promise me that you will talk to the young people. You will put a group together. She says, if you want to come, we will make everything available to you. We'll give you buses. We'll give you venues to have events. You know, we have a ancestry tracing thing. The archives department will come and set up there and all this kind of stuff, you know, but we want that connection. We want people to come home, and we want to have a situation that our brothers and sisters here can go and see where their people came from. And in some cases, where the people went to, in our case. You know, I just found out today, listening to Dr. Boros in one of his bicentennial speeches, because I always thought that our story was unique, not different, but unique. But I found out today that no, in fact, Liberia did produce slaves. 160,000 Liberians were sent out as slaves, sold into slavery. I always thought that we just returned. But some of us, you know, I'm sure as people do the ancestry tracing, they will find out, wait a minute, before my people left here as slaves, they were here, in fact. And I'm sure that must be the story for some of us, some of our brothers and sisters. But that would be my message to the young people, you know, to do their soul searching and to see the opportunity that exists, because it's such a virgin territory. The opportunities there, and because they're already living out in the greater diaspora and they have skills that are needed there, you know, they can go and make a significant difference, you know, in Barbados. Well, my mother, for sure, and my grandmother. So that is my father, he's from the American group that came back, and I don't know much about his side, except that I heard they came from North Carolina or somewhere. That's where they were enslaved. But for sure, I mean, when I went up to Crozierville, when was I in Crozierville? This was after Barbados. Yeah. No, this was before Barbados. No, this was after Barbados. So I went to Crozierville, went up to Port Hill, And I saw my cousins, who are like my uncles, Elfric, Aberport's first child, and the other ones, you know, and the younger ones that are in the States I was speaking to, how excited they all are. In fact, they're so excited, they could probably even be jealous that it was I and not they that had the opportunity, you know, to do what Uncle Albert and his siblings always wanted to do, including his grandfather. They all wanted to go back someday to Barbados. They never did. But more importantly, to connect with some of their relatives there. You know, so when I think on Uncle Albert, what would have been his 100th birthday not long ago? Was it his 100th? I think it would have been his, gosh, I can't remember now. But it was a significant milestone in his life. I was imagining the joy that fills his heart. You know, he so wanted to go, but he felt there was so much in Liberia that he needed to straighten out. And you know him, you know, we all used to be selling those papers. He used to run those tent sales in the house, and in the morning we were out there selling those papers for 25 cents. You know, you know, he wanted to straighten Liberia out, and he never had time to go back. That's why I told the Prime Minister too. I said, you know what, Uncle Albert, the only reason he didn't come because he had so much work to do there, and he was a lone ranger. In those days, there was only one Aberport. Only one person could stand up with them, and people like our other siblings, you know, like Judge Thorpe, you know, even Cousin Jonathan, who were on the other side, more or less, they were pro-government, they were with the government, you know, they were like, you know, Cousin Albert, you're embarrassing us, you know. So when I think of what we are doing and what we're going to be doing and the difference we're going to make, the changes we're going to bring about, you know, I sense the joy, the happiness in their hearts, you know, beginning with John Prince Porte himself, my great-great-grandfather, down to Uncle Albert's father, Conrad Cuslet Porte, and down to my grandmother and to my mother, because they were all very much, you know, like I said, my grandma used to sit down, we sit on the piazza, you said, and we're just talking about Barbados, just telling us about it, what she remembers, what she's heard, embracing the challenge by recognizing. And maybe it's not a bad thing that we are in the state that we are in now. You know, I can't imagine my children ever going to Liberia to live there. We have family land there. I don't even think about it. I haven't said y'all can take it, but literally that's what, not thinking about it, that's what it means, you know, because I'm not going to go live back in Liberia. I know that for a fact. My kids are not going to go there. But there's a good possibility that they will go to Barbados. Because Barbados is a high-income country. The population, there are more people in New Crouton than there are in all of Barbados. 230,000 people. You know, so it's easy to go there with a plan, with a mindset, and make a difference, and with something to offer. You know, so I think that's the way our children, the young generation, can memorialize, you know, their forebears. You know, by saying, what am I doing sitting out here in America? You know, okay, I earn a good living. I can earn a better living in Barbados. You know, and then you have the best of all worlds, really. You're still close to the States. You know, you're on African soil, really. You know, and you are in an environment where things work. I mean, you know, okay, save for the occasional cyclones and hurricanes and all these kind of things, you know, let's face it, it's comes with the territory. They have the same thing in India, you know, monsoon season. But yeah, when I speak to the young people, that's how I speak to them. And that's why I like the visa program that the government came up with, where you can go for a year. You get a year to work there from when COVID came about. And it's very popular. A lot of people are going there. You know, I think it's a very good thing. And the government is extending hands of friendship, especially to diaspora people. You know, I need to engage again with the Prime Minister, because they were doing a new immigration act to grant citizenship to any of us who can, and I did a BBC interview, the guy asked me, and I says, who can show or prove that they have Bayesian ancestry. And I said, look, you know, all of our archives got messed up during the war. The several wars, everything was looted, and what wasn't looted was burnt, or they made fire with it, or all those records and stuff. Thankfully, in Barbados, they have the records. That means that's what the British haven't taken, you know. So they're there. The problem is that they need to be preserved. They need to be digitized, you know, so that people can access them. They are not accessible. They are available, but they're not accessible. So that's one of the things that I'm working with the Prime Minister to help to raise some funds to, and you probably heard about the program with Dr. Stephen Ajay. He's going to be doing this big memorial grounds and all this kind of stuff there. So I'm working with them on that. But we need to revisit the discussion about the Immigration Act, because I think that will be a good trigger for a lot of our diaspora people, you know, the granting of citizenship. So I told the BBC journalist when he was interviewing me, he said, well, how can you prove? I said, listen, I have the tombstone from my family cemetery in Crozierville that says here lies John Prince Porte. He came from Barbados in 1865 on a boat. You know, I can trace him down to his son, to my grandmother, to my mother, to me, you know. Just don't ask me to give you the paper records because they just don't exist. Okay. Yeah, Kasawali. You know, for a long time, I didn't eat fufu. And when people ask me, I don't know how that entered my head. I said, my father told me not to eat fufu. I don't know how it came about, but it wasn't true. But cassava leaf, especially when you put the Grampy inside, you know the way to buy people that make it? We're talking about the new president, the first president of Barbados the other day. I say, well, madam, you know, she may be the first Barbadian president of Barbados, but she's not the first Barbadian president because we had two before her. In fact, we have three if you consider Judy Bryant, you know. So, you know, and he's from Crozierville. Those other two are from Monrovia. Yeah. But Judy's from Crozierville, you know.